All right, I think that we are now streaming. Welcome everybody to OT Research First Fridays. We are so excited to have everybody join us today on YouTube or here in person, or if you're watching later, that's cool too. Just very briefly, if you haven't seen any of our other videos, the whole purpose of this is to answer some questions about what research careers can look like, whether you're in occupational therapy or in another rehab profession, and what some of the common things that we think about being in a research career to prepare for one, or what that day-to-day looks like. So maybe you can learn if it's right for you. My name is Catherine Hoyt. I am an instructor at Washington University, and my primary area of research is in developmental delay of children 0 to 3 years of age with sickle cell disease. And my co-host, I'll let her introduce herself.
I'm Kelly Harris, also faculty in occupational therapy at Washington University School of Medicine. My clinical background is as a speech pathologist. And I'm excited to talk today about managing failure and rejection. And so as our special guest, we have Jaclyn Schwartz, and I'm going to let her introduce herself as well.
Hi, I am an assistant professor at Washington University in St. Louis, also in the program of occupational therapy. I'm an occupational therapist by training, and my area of research is about helping people better take their medications as prescribed.
Awesome. Thanks for being with us today, Jaclyn, Dr. Schwartz. So maybe just to kick off the conversation, the reason we wanted to have this talk about managing failure and rejection is we think it's something that happens to everybody. So why do you think managing failure and rejection is so important for people if they're considering a career in research or science?
So I think research and science is really hard, right? And if it wasn't really hard, we all wouldn't be in school for like 10, 15 years. And so, growing hurts because you have to do something where your skills aren't there yet. And the only way to grow your skills is to do something a little hard. Like as Glennon Doyle says, we could do hard things. And so, if you choose a career in science, you're choosing to grow your skills for a long period of time. And even as an early career faculty member, I'm like still growing my skills, and growth still hurts. And so I think that's why, there's a lot of failure, because it's part of the growth process.
That's a good way to frame it. I hadn't really thought about it like that, that growth requires a little bit of pushback.
Yeah, it's interesting. I remember thinking when I was doing my PhD, I'm sure I've told you this story, Catherine. I don't know if I've said it on here, but I remember working with my dissertation advisor, who I felt like was like, this well-renowned person, right? Always successful, had done all of these great things. And we got this feedback that was crushing to me. And he was like excited and like, oh my God, this is how we make it better. This is, like he was jumping in, and it just changed my whole framing about failure and rejection, because it wasn't really failure. It was really about, like you said, Jaclyn, growth and how do you make it better? And the other thing I think about is like, we're in academia where there's limited money, right? And there's limited everything. And so you're not going to get everything. And sometimes you have to not get something to get that next thing, right? And so it's about kind of building that resilience and really thinking about what do I do next? How do I build on this? Even if, this wasn't the outcome I wanted, but maybe it was still the right outcome to kind of get me to that next stage. So I like that framing, the growth framing.
I like a growth mindset almost. I feel like I needed this personally this week, because like the failure or the rejection or like not feeling like you're good enough or like your ideas are good enough, it can weigh a lot on you, and take a moment.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Oh, I think that's part of like the growth too. So like in academia, I feel, a lot of us are growing our research skills, but we're also growing our interpersonal skills. Mm-hmm. And so I think like as I've gotten more mature as a researcher, I've stopped like internalizing that like my failures are a failure of me. It was more like a failure of that idea or that specific proposal. And so as I've stopped like internalizing the failure more, the happier and well-adjusted person I've been.
Yeah, it makes me think of the 4 agreements, right? Like, don't take it personally.
It's
Yeah.
hard sometimes though, when
It
you
is
really
hard.
care about something, like, I feel like, especially papers, if I've submitted a paper and it comes back with all of these this feedback that can improve it, and I know that, but I love this paper and I care about it so much that it can hurt still.
Yeah, it's an investment. We put all this time and energy into whatever papers, grants, applications. So yeah. So let's, I guess, talk a little bit more specifically. I shared kind of one example. Can you talk about a specific rejection experience that you had and how you responded to that?
Sure. So, I mean, and I think this is one of the things that we don't talk about enough, because everyone in academia has manuscripts that weren't accepted, has grants that weren't funded, and just nobody talks about it, because you look at people's CVs and you see like what they have accomplished, but you don't see, like, for every grant that people get, like, you don't see the 10 grants or 20 grants that they submitted and didn't get. And then even like over the course of a career, I mean, my career in academia has not been that long so far, but I could see my success rates increasing. And so it was particularly as a younger person in academia looking at some more senior faculty, and they just seem so successful all the time. Like, you are not seeing those years and years at the beginning where they were much less successful. But in terms for me, I have so many stories about rejection and failure. It's hard to pick one. But, I recently applied for an RO3, and the first time I submitted it and it wasn't successfully funded. And I thought that my grant submission was awesome, and nothing, there was nothing wrong with it. And the reviewers were all wrong. And so I let myself have those feelings. But then, I got the reviewer feedback, and so the way it works with NIH is you get your score. And then after you get your score, you get the feedback. So you have this period of time where you know how you scored, or if you got discussed, but you don't know why your score is what it is. So you have this period of time where you could just feel all your feelings, but then you get the feedback and you're like, oh wow, this is a good point, and this would be much better if I did that. So I had my feelings there. I looked at the feedback, I made improvements, and then I submitted it again, and it was funded the second time. And it was a much better grant because, I got this feedback. And I'm just so glad. I'm so glad it wasn't funded the first time, even though at the time it wasn't funded. I was so mad about it.
I feel like what all of that you said made it a few really good points. When you see somebody's CV, or these people that are your mentors or faculty members, they've accomplished so much, but you don't necessarily know everything that they did to accomplish all of that. And it made me think actually of a friend of ours that keeps a CV of persistence, and just an Excel spreadsheet of everything that they've, even if it hasn't turned into a funded thing, it's look how hard you've worked.
Yeah, that's an interesting idea. And I think, we talk about this sometimes, right? You don't just celebrate the successes and the wins, you celebrate the submissions, you celebrate the completion, you celebrate, and that I think can help us to then cope with that kind of, temporary failure is what I'll call it, right? Because like you said, Jaclyn, it's might be failure, but it's great feedback that then makes it better, that makes it stronger. I think about it too. I was thinking about what you said about papers and we put all this time and energy into it. And sometimes we're so deep in it that we can't see what's wrong with it. We need that external eye. And so seeing it as that opportunity to get that feedback is key.
And the other thing about failure too is a lot of times, we like to think everything is about us, but a lot of times it's just not about you. So, going back to grants and even journal articles, for grants, I have no personal control over the budget of NIH. So when I think back to like very senior people, the funding lines at NIH, like 30, 40, 50% sometimes of the grants being submitted were getting funded when our most senior mentors were starting their career. And that's just not the case now. You know, sometimes it's, you know, between 5 and like 20% of applications get funded. So it's just a different environment. And so a lot of times, like, you know, there are aspects that you can control, but then there are also aspects about failure that you just can't control. Or if, for example, you're searching for a PhD position or you're searching for a faculty position, there could be a position open in a place that you really want to go. But if they're looking for someone with expertise in pediatrics and you're, you know, all your expertise is in adults, then it's just not going to happen. And it's not because of you. It's just, it's not a match at that time.
Yeah.
So you've already talked, I think, about some really good points. Like, do you have any thoughts or things that you've done in your past when you've experienced a rejection with a grant or a paper that you've done that maybe might be helpful for others to hear?
Yeah. So I think it's helpful to know that failure happens to everyone. So I try and like remind myself of it. And then just to know that it's okay to like feel your feelings. So you get it. And, you know, whatever feelings you have, those are valid. And so like Brene Brown recommends like journaling and writing a shitty first draft of like what you're feeling and why. And so that helps you move past the feelings and then to reflect on like what, you know, what your feelings are telling you about, you know, whatever happened and what you really want. So I think journaling can happen. Peer support's always good. So I know we're in some social groups that like if someone has a failure, they'll talk about it and, you know, we'll all give them like a virtual cheers for trying. So social support's always good. And then I keep going back to just like trying not to internalize that like my self-worth is not tied to my productivity and my successes as an academician. So that's something I still have to remind myself of.
I know I've been told a number of times by different mentors, like when I get a paper rejection or even just like, it's not a rejection maybe, but like they send back the reviewer comments, I like read them and I put them away for a day or two because I'll read them and get like myself worked up about the comments. Like, no, you're wrong for this reason. Like, this is how it should be. And I really have to put it away before I can then come back to it and be like, okay, these are reasonable comments clearly, or like maybe the comment is because I didn't write it clearly enough and I still think I'm right, but maybe I can reframe this in a way that, but it takes me a minute personally. I don't know, Kelly, if you have any similar experiences.
Oh, for
I know
sure.
you do.
I was just thinking a couple different things, right? I was thinking to myself, like, we have to kind of normalize failure and not in a way that we're seeking failure, right? But like shattering the norm that of what success looks like, right? Especially in academia, because we have this picture that is just not reality. You talked about that, Jaclyn, like thinking that, you know, everybody is so successful when they're not. And one of the things that's helped me is a lot of talks I've gone to, people actually lay out their failures and like the larger number of failures than they have of successes. And yet these are very successful people, right? So it's kind of helped to shift my framing. Years ago, when I was in clinical practice, I read this book called Before I Quit My Job. And I got it like, oh, I'm going to learn all these great things I need to do, right, before I go into private practice. And the whole book was about failure. And so as I'm reading it, I'm like, you know, it took a while to kind of understand that, thinking about failure being the only way we grow, right? So you don't really get better with your successes. I mean, you do, like you have an opportunity to do things and learn. But the success in and of itself doesn't make you better. It's like the recognition of the growth you've already had, whereas the failure actually makes you better. And I think shifting that framing was really helpful for me and helped me survive my doctoral program. And then I feel like these early years of as faculty, it's like that is how you survive, is learning that, yeah, my self-worth is not tied to responses from journal editors or reviewers or grant reviewers, but and I like that idea about persistence, Catherine. I'm thinking a lot about that, like this, you know, just kind of thinking about what you're doing as opposed to how others are responding to what you're doing is such a better shift. So yeah.
While you were saying that, I was thinking about like reframing too. So somebody recently in my life said that a mentor of hers had talked about, like, I was saying like, oh my God, writing this grant is so hard. I'm like stressed out about it. And her mentor suggested reframing it as grant writing heaven, because how cool that we get to just like sit here and write about our ideas. And like, that's pretty cool. And when I think about it like that, I put a post-it on my computer that says grant writing heaven, so that when in any moment that I'm like, oh, I hate this. This is so hard. Why am I doing this? Like, it's actually cool. I get to propose to do whatever I want.
What you were saying, Kelly, reminds me of this study by NIH. So they looked at NIH grantee success. And I'm just going off of memory, so I might not get the details 100% right. But they found that people whose first submission to NIH failed were more successful than people who had gotten the grant the first time. And so I think it just like helps people to internalize the lesson that you have to persist and just keep trying.
Yeah, we're really already talking about this. The next question I was going to ask was really, does it get easier, right? And do we still experience it? And I think we've all said yes to that bit, right? But like, does it get easier? Do you really kind of develop a thicker skin and manage better? So I don't know, either of you, what are your thoughts?
I don't know. I mean, it definitely gets easier. And I don't know if it's because, so you develop like emotional growth to like better handle, failure and rejection. But then also like I have more realistic expectations as I've grown in my career. So now like when I plan a grant submission, I not only plan the initial submission, like I plan for it to not, to not be funded and to be submitting again. So I already have like the resubmission on my calendar. Or when I'm like thinking about where I'm going to submit an article, I don't think about one publication, I'll think about 3. So when I'm talking with my co-authors, I'll be like, okay, like where are we going to submit and in what order? So in case like, you get a desk rejection, then you could go ahead and submit to the 2nd or 3rd, 4th or 10th place on your list until you find the right home for your manuscript and you've improved your manuscript to where it's ready to be published. So part of it too is just like understanding the process and having like reasonable expectations.
I remember my first desk rejection and I was like, wow, okay. Like wasn't even worth it to read. And then I had to sit and think like, man, I just saved 6 weeks to 6 months of my life, right? That I can like just turn this around and send it right back out. I don't have to wait for a delayed rejection, and that reframing helped me think like, okay, there are like, how do you find the upside? What's the silver lining here?
I remember recently, Kelly, I asked you about a journal that I thought was maybe would be a reach for an article of mine. It's like a influential journal, like high impact factor. And your response was, I haven't published there, but they gave me the nicest rejection. And like, that made me want to submit there because like, if it's a helpful rejection, it can improve the paper. And if they're very quick, then why not?
Yeah, that still stands as my best rejection. And because like, it wasn't nice, but it was, the comments were so detailed that like it won't be easy, but it should be much easier to make it better, right? It was such a like, I was reading it like, oh yeah, I would have rejected this too. This makes sense now, and I know what I need to do. It was very clear. So yeah, that still holds the record as my favorite rejection. The other thing I think, another example, and this isn't really a rejection, but I got feedback on a manuscript that I felt like was really like, I took it, it was personal to me and it was kind of harsh, but it also was things that needed to change that I don't know that I, in that moment, at that point in my career, had the courage to speak up about. And so in that case, that reviewer was really like my ally to force revisions that were necessary that I didn't bring out on my own. Because there were multiple authors, right? And I was the most junior person on this team. And that shift in framing helped me to really like deal with the feedback because it was harsh. But it was like when I shifted in my mind and thought, okay, like this is the help that I needed because I didn't at that moment have the courage to say some of those things. It changed my whole perspective. Yeah.
And I think,
go ahead, Jaclyn.
So I think like having the failure and rejection and like receiving lots of feedback from peer reviewers has made me like a better peer reviewer. So now when I serve as a peer reviewer, like I can better put myself and like try and make my feedback to other people like in a growth promoting way to help them like grow the manuscript to be the one that like people want to read in the journal.
Yeah.
So I think failure helps like both sides of the process.
When you said that, I was thinking about like, I think it's helped me, like even when I submit an article and the cover letter to the editor, like how am I going to frame this so it is interesting to them? And I don't think I realized that with the first couple of papers that I was submitting, that like they're humans too and need to understand why this matters to them.
And the peer reviewer and the editor are gonna look at your paper unlike anyone else. Like they're gonna give that paper more time. So like if a peer reviewer comes away from your manuscript confused, like no one else is gonna understand your manuscript. Like if they're, dedicating several hours to it and they're missing something, it's gonna be better for everyone.
Kelly, I can tell you're about to say something, but because I have a way that I want to shift the conversation. So if it's the same.
Oh, it's one sentence. I'll be quick. I just was thinking as you guys both were talking is that, our ultimate goal is to have something that we're proud of and that moves our work forward. And without failure and rejection, we don't get either of those things, right? I mean, maybe like, right. But who has a perfect first draft so I think that's the other thing I think about is just, I want to be proud of this. And so I would rather fix it now than put it out there and realize.
Yeah, that would be horrible.
After. Yeah.
That would be terrible if something got like put out into the world and then somebody found this fatal flaw of it. And then, yeah, I'd way rather get it ahead of time.
And I just have one more thought on that. And I can't remember where I heard it, but like really good feedback is like a gift because someone just gave you so much time and so much effort to like review and think about your work. And so like you were talking about, Catherine, like reframing instead of thinking about feedback of like all the things that you did wrong, like thinking about it as like a gift that either someone or some like random person, out in your scientific universe gave you to like really think about your work and help you grow as a scientist. So just reframing to think about it as a gift.
Yeah,
that's a nice way to think about it. One thing I was thinking about the last few minutes that I just think we should just spend a few moments here talking about is like going all the way back to the very beginning. Like if you are considering a career in research or science and thinking about applying to a PhD program, there's failure and rejection in that too. And I know that both within the three of us, I know I applied to a PhD programs 1 year and didn't get into anywhere that I applied and had to reapply a second year, and it was a second career for me. So that was a hard decision too. And like, maybe I sometimes even still feel this way, like that I Peter principled myself. And I thought that at the time a lot if you are unfamiliar, the Peter principle is when people are like really good at their job. So they get promoted, but they get promoted like above their skill level. And that's like a deep fear of mine, but like, even that's a tangent that we don't need to get into today, but like, maybe talking about that application and failure and rejection at the very beginning. I don't know if either of you have any thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean, I had a very similar experience, Catherine, where I applied the first year and then just didn't find anywhere that was the right fit. And I was so much better off the second year because I found a place that would be a better fit for me to grow. And I was just like more ready to go on the trajectory and to have all the things that you need to have to go into a PhD program. So, and I know that one of the things that could be hard about failure is when you see other people succeeding. And so, especially like when you know someone personally who succeeded. And so like, I knew the people who got in, and so at the time you're like, oh man, I can't believe this happened. But, now I'm like so excited for the people that got in and the career that they've had. And now they're my colleagues. So yeah, time is always provides great perspective, but it could be hard in the moment.
Yeah, I was thinking about something even before the application process. When I was thinking about going into a PhD program, I emailed faculty in the program that I, had a connection to, and just to inquire, and got like this email that was like, "No, you should look other places. You should do." Yeah, I mean, it was rejection, right? And when I sat and thought about it, and it made me sit and think about it. And so when I reached back out and was like, no, this is what I want, and this is why I think this is a good fit. And then he met with me, and his argument was like, I needed to know that you knew. I mean, it was almost like a test, a little bit of a mean test, but he became one of my strongest supporters for the rest of my time in the program, getting into the program and throughout the program and after. And I think, rejection can come in many different small ways, even before those kind of big applications. And it's really about that persistence piece. And like you said, rejection's not a gift, the reviewers are a gift, but seeing it as an opportunity to reflect, reframe, reconsider, and really just kind of figure out, to be resilient, to persist, to push through.
Yeah, that I think is like the take home message, to push through, be resilient, find the persistence, and wait for the right fit, because, every article isn't the right fit for every journal. Every student isn't the right fit for every program and every mentor, it just might not be the time or the place, but it doesn't mean it's the wrong path.
Right.
Something like that.
Yeah.
Anybody have anything else?
I think those were good final thoughts.
Any questions in the chat? Or I see Sue Duff, if you have anything that you'd like to add.
I don't have anything to add, but this was really super. Thank you. I'm driving, so I can't take too much time. I'm listening on my phone, but thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for joining.
Of course.
And thank you, Jaclyn, for joining and sharing your wisdom on this topic.
I'm always happy to talk about. I'm happy to talk about anything, but you can always talk about failure.
Michelle, if you'd like to stop the stream.